Right, we're underway. Hi everyone, this is Tim at North and South Podcasts. This is a Hope Street podcast. Hope Street is a charitable organisation in the northwest of England in the Ormskirk area. If you recall, I did a podcast a few months ago with Sheila, who is the co-founder of Hope Street. And today we're very fortunate to have Dom, who is Sheila's husband and the other co-founder of Hope Street, to talk to us not just about Hope Street as a CIC, community interest, company, a community interest company, but also to talk about being a carer for someone who's had severe mental health issues and has worked on overcoming them. So Dom, how are you today?
I am great, thank you. I just muted you by accident there. I'm great.
No worries.
I'm great. Great, thank you.
Good. And good to see you today. Looking well in a library there in the background, using the community to help you do your good work. But it's great to have you on board today. Obviously, we want to get positive messages out to people. People can contribute financially through coffee.com. Share the podcast, support in any way, give us a good review. And if you want to get on board, help with technology, come on. If you've got people who you think would be good to get on board, feel free to approach me through Twitter at North Podcasts. So Dom, Hope Street, how long has Hope Street been going now? Because it's been quite a few years, hasn't it, since its inception?
Do you know what? It will be 4 years on May the 15th. May
the 15th, and I've been going for 2.5 years. And I remember the first time I went to the meeting, I had a very warm welcome from yourself. You sat down and spoke to me for quite a while. And I spoke to you and Sheila doing a stall in, I think it was Formby Christmas Market in late.
Yeah, it's Formby Christmas Market. I think that was 2019.
Yeah, 2019.
November 2019 it was, I think, because they turned the lights on early. So.
That's right, because obviously it was COVID a year later, wasn't it? But I go to the Tuesday sessions every week, and there's lots of different sessions going on. How important has Hope Street come to your life? And has it been a part of you supporting Sheila? How has that fitted in with your caring?
Hope Street is a massive part, whether I want it to be or not. These days, it's a massive part of my life. From a caring perspective and from a growth perspective for Sheila, it's been amazing. So yeah, it's been a massive part of my life, and pretty much all we talk about as a couple, and what we're going to do. But as I say, for Sheila, it's been huge for her growth and for her recovery. It's been absolutely massive for her, and to be honest, it's not been without its challenges, and challenges for her, challenges for us as a couple in a relationship. But yeah, it's a huge part of my life.
Good stuff. And I think the issue with Hope Street and setting up a CIC is that there's obviously a lot of things which you think that people will probably be aware of and say, oh yeah, you've got to do a lot of paperwork and you've got to sort out places where you can do meetings and do events, but it's all the extra stuff as well, isn't it? The management of people, lots of different events going on through the week. You need other people to come and help out, and it becomes a little bit of a minefield. But I think that the positivity from yourself and Sheila and from the other members of Hope Street, I think is really driving it forward. And there's a lot of different services that Hope Street offers, and we spoke, me and Sheila spoke about that. What are the things that you find most interesting about Hope Street from your own kind of perspective?
To be honest, I mean, I've learned so much from our guest speakers. I've learned a lot about people. I've learned a lot about different types of mental illness. I guess if we go right back to the beginning, even before Hope Street, before Sheila had her breakdown, although I'd always say always been empathetic, I had very little awareness of mental health. For me, mental health was you had a nervous breakdown. And I remember speaking to Sheila, and somebody who actually comes, she's a friend, she comes to Hope Street now. she had a nervous breakdown, and this was 2015. And I said to Sheila, you know, why has this happened? And Sheila was like, I don't know, maybe it's just because like other people are getting married and she's not in a great relationship. And I was like, oh, she must be weak then. And that was my understanding of it. I didn't, you know, so that's been the biggest thing for me since Sheila got ill, and then obviously since we started Hope Street. And actually, since we started Hope Street, I realised that from about 20 to 22, I suffered from high functioning depression, which I just thought I was having a bit of a bad time because my dad had died. But it was actually high functioning depression. So that basically where you can get up and you can go to work and you can socialise, and, you know, you put essentially that mask on. But when you're alone, you have some dark thoughts. When you know, I spent probably 18 months going to bed every night and not wanting to wake up in the morning. But you do, and then you go through that perpetuating cycle.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I've had problems with anxiety since my youth, but when I was 29, that was when it kind of started for me, the depression side of things as well. And before 29, I remember reading about depression in books and thinking, like, I remember reading an article by a woman who said depression is just nonsense for middle class people who suddenly find life tough. And I still remember the author of that. She doesn't write for that particular paper anymore. But I think it's fair to say that the landscape and the media discussion of this has changed a lot in the UK since those times. But I think I was similar to you. I thought, who are these people who have mental health problems? And like, you know, even though I'd had one with like kind of anxiety all my life without really having a name for it. And I think what you said there, like, you can now look back at 20 to 22 and go, that's what that was. There's now a name for it. And that can empower you. It can also label you to an extent. You need to be careful that you don't let it define you too much. But you can then look at it and go, I've now got a name for it. And now we can look at strategies and tools to move beyond it. And I think I'm similar to you. I find the Tuesday meetings where we have people coming in. We had someone in yesterday talking about the impact of the menopause on women and the mental health issues surrounding that, to do with hormones and the body being in flux, which was very, very powerful. And the stuff I've learned about me and also other people, but also just general life skills, which help everyone to cope day to day with the kind of pressures. I think that's what I love the Tuesday sessions. And when I don't go, I think, I've missed out there, not just in terms of meeting people and, you know, seeing friendly people, but in terms of helping me to develop. And I think that kind of personal development aspect of Hope Street is also a really big part of it.
I was just going to say, I also feel incredibly grateful and incredibly lucky with the life that I've had, because I've been exposed to people who have given their stories, like some of the people you've had on this podcast, and I've not experienced any of that. Yeah. You know, in some ways, I've felt a bit of a fraud in the past, because I'm doing this and I'm talking about this, but I don't suffer from anxiety. I don't suffer from depression. I have mental health, but I don't have a mental illness. But I know about it because of my experiences with Sheila, caring for Sheila. And I know that if you're not careful, you can easily develop a mental illness if you are caring for somebody. And I feel really lucky to have had the skills and the contacts with people who helped me kind of avoid that, I guess.
I think that's really important as well, because I know, you know, from discussions with yourself and Sheila, obviously life's tough. And then life's also tough when someone is suffering with their mental health. And I think it's also tough when someone else is having to deal with that mental health. And how far into the relationship with you and Sheila did you have discussions about these kind of things? Or did Sheila's mental health issues become more acute after you had met? How did that kind of pan out?
Speaking to Sheila now, she says now she knows what she knows. She's always suffered it.
Yeah.
So, there were times at the beginning of our relationship where things were difficult. Now, I played my part in that myself, but when I look back, and I would think, oh, she overreacted to that. Why is she reacting like that? So it's kind of always been there. And then in 2012, I basically wasn't faithful. So I think looking back now, that was Sheila's first breakdown. But again, I didn't realise it, didn't know about it.
Yeah.
Just know that she went, took her to the doctor, she got some medication and just nurse her through it, just like, you do when you love somebody. But then, her second, what you might call breakdown, I can actually pinpoint the day when I noticed the change in her behaviour. And we'd gone to Nice. I was doing the Ironman in Nice. Sheila was just insistent that she was going to the beach, which is totally not like her because we were with my family and everything like that. And so she had to do that. And that was just the first time. And I thought, oh, that's a bit weird. And then there were some other times and I was like, what is going on here? There was a time 2 months later, we went on holiday again with my family for my mum's 65th, I think it was. And she tore into the kids for like no reason. My nieces and nephews, I don't know how old they were, probably 12, less than 12 or something. And she just tore into them. And it's like, wow, what's going on here? And then there was loads of different things happening. And I was like, I don't know what's going on here. I don't understand it. I think I said, last night at the session, the place where I went to find the information, which is not normally a place I would ever go to find anything out, was the Daily Mail. They have like a female section that talked about the menopause. And I was like, oh, well, this must be it. Ultimately, and as I said last night, now I'm a bit confused whether it was the start of the menopause or the other issues that she'd suffered in her life that caused the breakdown, and maybe it was a combination of both. I don't know. That conversation I told you about where I said, oh, our friend must be quite weak, that happened in like the September. And we never really spoke about mental health at all. Never. And then she had a breakdown on, I think it was January the 6th, 2016. And again, it wasn't like we spoke about it. It was just a case of, right, head down. How do we make this better? Concentrate and focus on her.
It's a difficult one as well, because if people meet each other, you might have a mental or physical illness, and at some point you need to share that with someone. But then you get people who might not necessarily know, particularly with mental illness, it can be there in the background, and then it's kind of reveals itself during the relationship. Now, Paul Cope, I've just ordered Paul Cope's book. He did a meeting at Hope Street a few months ago, absolutely brilliant. And he said quite famously that everyone is mad to a degree. And I think what you said about the skills you learn at Hope Street helps everyone, regardless of whether you're a carer, someone who's suffered, or just a human being, and like a highly functioning, successful human being. And I know that you do a lot of the strategies that we've heard from speakers. Like, we've had some fantastic speakers in that you've introduced as well through your work and other things that you do. But the skills that you learn equip you. But how many relationships out there are there that don't make it past these initial difficult times with people who might have mental health issues? And I think back to some of my relationships and in the past, and now I look back at them and go, I wasn't in the right place there. And I didn't communicate that to the other person because I didn't even have the language. And even when you do know, it's hard because you don't feel good about yourself a lot of the time. And obviously you got through that with Sheila, but there must be so many other relationships that don't make it through that kind of stage of the relationship. And, you looked into it, didn't you? You went to the Daily Mail, and all of a sudden you get that information. And I think one of the things with Hope Street is it's about getting that information out there as much as possible. I mean, the speaker last night about the menopause was, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. There's so much info out there that if people know about it, it can help people to get through those challenging times, because people know what's causing it.
With that, just on that last night, I mean, I said it last night, and I think that when it comes to menopause, we are like 6 years behind where we are with mental health.
Yeah.
It feels very much like there's the beginning of a conversation, but there's no understanding of it. And that's really how it was, back in 2016 sort of thing. And I think for me, probably 2018, 2019 was when mental health began to come to the fore. Unfortunately, through things like, Robin Williams taking his own life, or the lady off Love Island, whose name escapes me at the moment. But unfortunately, it takes things like that for other people to start talking about it. And it feels, when it comes to something like menopause, which is ridiculous now, knowing what we know now after last night, and after watching, say, the Davina McCall program. But, that's where we're at.
Yeah. And as you say, getting that information out there, it's important. And we've spoken sometimes before at Hope Street meetings, and about, in the past, people just didn't discuss things. It was kind of like brushed under the carpet. I've just been listening to a podcast of a blind boy podcast, and he was talking about when he grew up in Ireland, and the father figure, the authority figure, and you never challenged them. And it was that kind of, we just get on with it, and we just do things. But when you have these issues and you can't even explain it, I mean, to be going through the menopause and to just be given antidepressants, I'll take a few of these, you'll be fine. You're not even addressing the issues. And to have mental health illness and you don't even know what it is, and then you go to the GPs and they say, oh, take these antidepressants. And as you say, it is getting better, but there's a lot of information that we still need to get out there. And it is quite heartening in schools now. I'm a teacher. We talk about mental health regularly, and we have my school's got an on-site counsellor, which is phenomenal. And, I say to the kid, like, you've got someone to talk to there. And again, they might feel like some of the ones who may need to speak to that counsellor might not feel like doing it or whatever, but it's there, and it kind of just normalizes that discussion more and more. And I think that the skills you've learned through Hope Street have obviously helped you in understanding Sheila and also yourself. And, long may that continue, that we have these discussions where people can learn skills to develop themselves. I mean, the Paul Coat meeting we had a few months ago, I've never heard that. Someone say, listen, here's how you work, here's how your mind works, and here's what you can do. And I'd never heard it. And I've read a lot about mental health, but there's so much good stuff out there that we don't always find out about. And I think that's one of the great things about Hope Street. I think it's fair to say that what you've learned through Hope Street has really helped you and your relationship with Sheila. And I think, it's a fine example of how helping someone to chase their dreams and their passions. I mean, Hope Street's a big thing for Sheila, isn't it? About trying to change things and provide services where there aren't any, where there's a shortfall in health provision. So it does tick a lot of boxes. How do you find the time to commit to Hope Street? Do you have other interests? How do you kind of balance that?
Not very well. When we started it, I would just started a new job literally 3 weeks before, and then that job took more than I thought it was going to take of me. Then about 12 months later, I decided to get into property, but I also at the same time decided to do an NLP practitioner course as well as managing Hope Street. And to be honest, I got to a point in around August or late July, August 2019. And I just said to Sheila, look, I can't do everything. can't do all of this. So you're going to have to take more of Hope Street. And also it was a case of, with Hope Street, Sheila and I, we work very differently. And that for me is a big challenge. But then it became kind of Sheila took the lead and I would support her essentially, which is very much how it still is. When I left work in October to concentrate on my property business, I kind of said to Sheila, well, okay, I'll do like a day a week. Actually, it's more like 3 days a week that I spend essentially working for, but not getting paid, for Sheila and for Hope Street.
Do you know the property business, is that quite a flexible thing that you can dip in and out of and plan your days? Does that allow you some flexibility?
It does, to be perfectly honest. That's one of the reasons why I do it. It does allow for flexibility, but you have still got to be consistent. There's certain things you've got to do consistently to enable you to stay active, to stay in the market, to do all of the things you need to do to continue growing. But some of those things can be done at weekends. Some of those things can be done of an evening. So the Hope Street stuff that needs to be done, the meetings that need to be had, they can be done during the day.
That's good. I think it's good as well that you have that understanding, because people are different, and part of the thing to do with learning about yourself and others is you say, right, I know my strengths and weaknesses, and I know your strengths and weaknesses. We can talk about them. You work this way, I work this way. We can come up with a strategy to move forward. What have been the most... Sorry, go on.
So I was just going to say that came, to be perfectly honest, that came through conflict.
Yeah.
It came through me wanting to do something one way and Sheila wanting to do it another way, and we just couldn't agree. And it caused it caused a lot of it caused issues in our relationship as well.
Yeah.
Because there was like frustration and anger about different ways that we wanted to go. So ultimately I said to Sheila, look, I want to be married to you, but at the moment I can't be married to you and work with you in this way with Hope Street, because it's just not making me happy and it's causing problems for us. So we had to figure out a way how that was going to work. And really what I do now is act as a supporting role for Sheila.
I mean, that's
taking time.
Yeah. But that's the ultimate wisdom, isn't it? It's about conflict resolution. Whatever conflict comes up or whatever issues come up, it's about being solution focused and having those discussions. And I think, it's funny, isn't it? I've heard you say this phrase a lot, like sometimes things are hidden in plain sight, and sometimes there's elephants in the room, and you need to say, right, this is the situation and we need to address it, and doing that calmly. And sometimes there'll be conflict, etc., and tension, but it's about ultimately getting past that and resolving it. And that's the ultimate wisdom, isn't it, to be able to do that with equanimity and to move forward. I was just about to say, what have been the most difficult aspects of being a carer for Sheila? Obviously, there's been times when it's more difficult than others, but what skills have you learned, and what have been the most difficult aspects of it?
The most difficult aspect has been to put myself first.
Yeah.
For a long, long time, it was Sheila first.
Yeah.
But what I learned through going to once I had to seek help, but I learned that I had to do things for me in order to be the best husband or the best carer for Sheila. And it doesn't sound like it makes any sense at all.
Yeah.
Because how can you be, in some ways, some people might think that's quite selfish because you're looking after yourself. But if you don't look after yourself, you're in no position to look after somebody else.
Yeah.
And 55% of carers will end up suffering from depression. Once you get to that point, you then can't give your best to that other person. So if it means that if I take an hour a day for myself, or if I go out with friends, not feeling guilty was a massive issue. You know, I couldn't do it. I couldn't not feel guilty, and I couldn't not worry. But over time, learning not to do that has been the biggest thing for me. It was the hardest thing, but it's also been the biggest thing as well.
Yeah, and I think that this idea of, it's important to serve others and it's important to be kind to others. The best way to assure that is to make sure that you are in a good place yourself, because if you're not in a good place yourself, and I use the example of a teacher, if you've got like a teacher who's stressed and not happy, that's not going to help the pupils in the charge. If you've got a parent who's stressed and unhappy, they're not going to be able to help the children as they're growing as effectively. And I think that putting yourself first, and it's not like saying like, oh, I matter more than anyone. It's not saying that. It's saying by looking after me, I'm in a better position to look after others. And I think that that's a very key and important skill. As absolutely. You say, I'll let you come in now, but I just want to say it can be as important as making sure like you have a little bit of time, as you said, an hour a day to yourself. That's intelligent, and that's likely to make you more effective. Sorry.
Yeah, well, what I was going to say was, it took me a long time to realise that, and it wasn't even an hour a day that I give myself, and it got to the point where I didn't seek any help until after Sheila had wanted to take her own life. That was my point where I could go one way or another. And I said to a friend, look, this has happened. I just don't know how to cope anymore. And luckily for me, I was able to afford to get some help privately. It was an hour, or was it 2 hours? Maybe 1 or 2 hours every 2 weeks, because that's all I could afford. But that was an amazing time for me, because even now I struggle to talk to people about my feelings, about what goes on, even though I tell everybody else, this is what we've got to do. It's something that I am still working on myself. But having that time to do that with somebody who didn't know Sheila, so couldn't judge her, she would never meet her, so she would never judge her because she's never going to see her, if you know what I mean. To have somebody independent who could say, no, actually, the way you feel is okay. It's okay to feel like this behaviour from Sheila was out of order. It's okay to feel that under pressure because of all these external family issues that are going on in your family and her family and with Sheila as a whole. All of that is okay. And just having that release was a massive, massive thing.
Just in relation to the counselling, Dom, I've had counselling, and I found doing it every 2 weeks, as you say, more financially sustainable, because within a monthly period, you're only paying for like 2 sessions. Also, between those 2 weeks, you kind of have more of a chance to implement those ideas. And I spoke to Diane Jennings in an earlier podcast around the same time as Sheila about the services she offers, and I would really recommend counselling. As you said, you were talking to someone who didn't know Sheila, but was giving you advice and opening up your mind to things. Given that you haven't had any particular, or you're not suffering from mental health problems, but you were struggling to cope, what would you say to other people who think, counselling's not for me, or even if they've got a mental health issue, I don't think I could talk about these things? Would you offer any advice to those people?
So I think, I guess importantly for me, I went to see a psychotherapist, not specifically a counsellor. I have had counselling in the past. So I mentioned before about when my dad died, didn't talk to anybody for 3 years, went to a counsellor and just basically blurted everything out to her and cried for 2 hours with her. But I think that counselling doesn't work for everybody, but it does work for some people. And I think it's important not to write it off. You know, I think one of the key things when it comes to counselling is who the counsellor is, and if you align with that counsellor. If you don't align with that counsellor, it'll never benefit you. So I know that a lot of people can't do this because they have to go through the NHS quite often. But if you are going private, don't be afraid to kind of go to different people, because ultimately, if you're paying money, it's got to serve you, and that's the thing to remember.
I found I've spoken to about 4 or 5 counsellors through my time, and as you say, there's 3 of them were funded by the NHS and they had to wait, or one was through a charitable organisation. But the ones I've paid for, as you say, you're a bit more in control of those because you're ultimately paying. But you do need to be assertive in those meetings or in that process and say, am I getting anything from this? But as you said, as a male, I found it too. To all of a sudden be in a meeting where you're saying stuff which you think is true, or you're talking about issues which you think are just, you can't find a way forward. And then you'll have a counsellor who doesn't know the other person or doesn't know you, will say, well, what about this? What about that? Or to be honest with you, that doesn't sound right to me. I noticed this, the way you were saying it. And they challenged me and I was like, whoa, I've never thought about that before like that. And it was so eye-opening. And as you said, it's those things hidden in plain sight sometimes that you just miss in your own life. And to have someone else listen and to offer you help and assistance and guide you, it is very, very empowering. And one of the things I think Hope Street wants to do in the future is look to provide counselling through its services. But
yeah,
also,
so we currently work with Northwest Counselling Northwest.
Yep.
And if you want to provide the link to them after this, feel free. And they offer solution-based counselling. But I think one of the things that you just said then, and it's really, really key when someone is struggling with their mental health, is they have to be open to be challenged. And whether that challenge is moving out of their comfort zone, challenged about how they're thinking about a certain situation, only when they accept that to a degree they're in control of the future, will they begin to make progress. And in order to do that, we need to accept that the way that we think isn't always the right way. If we are focusing on a certain behavior from somebody else and saying that is the reason why I'm like this, well, that person needs to challenge the way that they're thinking. I'm kind of being careful about what I'm saying here, because it's for somebody who's struggling with anxiety or struggling with depression, obviously what they're going to do is they're going to say, well, I don't want to be like this. But when we begin to think, actually, I am like this in part because of the way that I think, then they can begin to move forward. And a good psychotherapist or a good solution-based counsellor will help them do that.
Yeah, that's so true.
Counselling isn't just about somebody sitting there and listening while you talk.
Yeah, I was talking to a counsellor once, or listening to a counsellor on a podcast, I think, who said that they've often had people come in because maybe they were forced to or they were advised to. And very quickly they said, listen, I can't help you. You don't want to help yourself or challenge yourself. And that can often be quite eye-opening to some people, but also maybe not to others. But the way I was challenged in counselling, I couldn't believe how powerful that was.
We've had that before. We've had people come to us, and again, it's difficult for me to, I guess, say this and be taken with some kind of credibility, because I don't suffer with depression. But some people, their depression or their anxiety defines them, and they get attention because of that. And they kind of say they don't want to change, but they're comfortable with it because it's what they've had it for so long. It's what they know. So although it's not very nice, there's a certainty to it, and there's uncertainty in changing who you are, in going down another path, in being challenged. And we've had instances at Hope Street where we've had to say to people, look, you don't want to change. And because you don't want to change, you're affecting the progress of other people. So if you're not willing to come with people on that journey, then really this group this place isn't the best place for you to develop.
Yeah, I think that's a very important thing. And a lot of people say about I've spoken to people, and I do it myself all the time, where they say, yeah, but that person did this. You go, yeah, that person did do that, and you can't control them, but you can control the way you react. And I've said this to people, and I don't always practice what I preach myself. We're all human and flawed, etc. But I've said to people, but you're making out that you've got no control over that response. Like that's just so disempowering. You're giving complete power to other people or to external events, and it doesn't serve anyone. It's an egotistical kind of. By egotistical, I don't mean like people are deliberately being egotistical, but it's their ego just takes over. The idea of the self, like that is me protecting my space, and this person has done this, and I've got no control over my reaction. And you can react differently.
Yeah. Do you know what's funny? The only person that can make me do that is Sheila. Honestly, I don't get annoyed with anybody else. I can take it all, but that's the only thing. Sheila's the only person that can make me just kind of completely lose my rational thinking. Irrational thinking. Well, maybe that's marriage. And do you know what, actually? I was talking to someone not so long ago whose partner has struggled for a long time. And the lines are really blurred because I've only ever been married to Sheila. So, Sheila's had her issues with her mental health. Apologies about the noise in the background if you can hear it.
Sorry.
But I don't know sometimes what is Sheila's personality and what is her mental health. And that's really difficult, just to take a step back in a discussion. That's really difficult because obviously for me, a mental health perspective, I'm kind of like, it's all going off here. From a mental health perspective, obviously I want to be supportive. But if it's kind of like just the fact that, Sheila doesn't want to do something or she is just being obstructive, there are blurred lines. So I get it wrong sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing. I've just done a podcast on equanimity, just me talking about equanimity and staying calm. But when you work with people or live with people or are in close relationships with people, you can't just like, right, I need to extricate myself from it. And you can still say, right, there's red lines here and there's things that need to be addressed. And you said before, when you said to Sheila, like, I can't work with you like this and we need to sort it out. And then you move towards a resolution. There are going to be times when you feel that physiological response of frustration and anger, and it's about managing it better and being calm. And you'll still have times when you feel like lashing out, but it's about being constructive, isn't it? And you also need to let things go, and that's hard because you say, right, that's their personality, so I need to mention and also mention the issue. Say, listen, when that happens, that frustrates me, but you need to just bear in mind that people can be tired, they can be having a bad day. It could be to do with their upbringing, the genetics, and also it might be to do with the mental health. And I think that's hard, being able to judge what's what. I think you've described that issue perfectly.
I think something that this whole, I guess, experience has also taught me is, like you've just said, then somebody could be having a bad day. So if you hold the door for somebody and they're just rude, it's dead easy to make a snarky comment or say something. You don't know what's just happened to that person. It might be that they're really rude, or it might just be that they just lost a job, or You know, they just found out that somebody that they're close to is got a terminal illness or something really horrific. So just let stuff go.
Yeah. And again, it's that non-judgmental nature to your just day-to-day life, to be non-judgmental. It doesn't mean that you don't look at the evidence and come up with ideas of what's going on, but you just say, right, I'm not going to just jump to conclusions with that.
Yeah. Can I just say, Tim, you know, when you were saying, you know, what's been that, I guess, the hardest part of being a carer, I think it's another element to that is it's loneliness.
Yeah.
Because a bit like somebody who's suffering with depression, right? They don't talk about it because they feel nobody else knows about it. No one else will understand. You know, when I was caring for Sheila, essentially full time as well as doing my job, but it was, I couldn't talk to anybody. The first person I really spoke to was the psychotherapist, and I couldn't talk to people because people just wouldn't. I felt, even those closest to me, I felt they would judge you. And I loved her, and I didn't. Well, I do love her, and you know, I didn't want anyone judging her because I could see what she was going through, and somebody who isn't in it, I felt wouldn't understand. So I didn't talk about it, and I didn't want people saying to me, you know, she's pulling your leg, or you know, she can't be that bad, or blah, because I knew it. You know, I saw that constant mode of fight or flight. I saw it every day, and anxiety for me, I just feel so much sympathy for people who struggle with anxiety because I couldn't live like that. I couldn't live in that constant state of tension. And you know, when Sheila left the house to take her own life, I understand why. I can honestly understand why people do it.
Yeah.
Because it's just a horrible way to live.
You've mentioned there about the importance of looking after yourself as a carer, about being able to talk about it and address the loneliness, about the empathy at the heart of it, that you need to understand the situation, about being able to also detach the mental health from the personality, and to just be mindful about the day-to-day reality of life, you know, with Sheila or anyone else. How patient have you got to be in terms of, do you feel like patience is a big part of it as well, in terms of just taking your time over things? Because, you know, I know you're the kind of person who wants to get stuff done because you're quite forward thinking. Do you sometimes have to go, right, okay, this might take a bit of time, or is patience a big part of it too?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really big or a really good point to make. I think when Sheila was ill, I just had to be patient.
Yeah.
And actually, and I know that you've just kind of like described me in a way there, but I am quite a patient person.
Yeah.
But I mean, patience is massive. I think I'm glad that when Sheila got ill, she was married to me, and she wasn't in some of her previous relationships, because I know that she probably would have taken her own life. She wouldn't have had support. And as I say, although I didn't know a lot about it, I just knew that this was absolutely horrible for her. And although someone might say to me, well, how do you cope? I was like, well, I'm not being funny, but I'm not going through that. You know, I've just mentioned to you that constant fight or flight mode, that constant tension, that constant angst. I don't have that. You know, that for me was always something in the back of my mind, that I need patience, but you can't lose your temper because you just make it worse.
Yeah.
You can't say, come on, get up, get out of bed, don't be lazy, because look, you know, it just makes it worse. And I don't understand how anybody could make to want somebody in that situation feel worse about themselves, because they already feel desperate. And that's the word, is desperate.
Yeah. Funnily enough, I just read in the paper this morning about exam stress for young people in schools who haven't had exams for like 2 or 3 years because of COVID and all that. And they said one of the big things was like, try not to force your child to leave the house, because then that becomes the issue. You might say, oh, let's get out and get some fresh air, but you need to be able to judge it and go, actually, I'm not going to push that today because I can see they're just not in that place. And I think what you've described is you have to have a multiple skill set that you say, right, today I need to be like this, like that, to manage the situation. But that's the same in general life as well, isn't it? That you've got to have those skill sets to say, right, this isn't going to work this way. I need to be flexible in the way that I do things. But it sounds, another thing I want to say is when I was really bad in 2007, 2008, I remember other people caring for you. You've already mentioned this, the empathy side of it, but other people visiting you or showing that they care really, really matters. It sounds ridiculous, but I remember when I was really ill in hospital, not necessarily with mental health issues, but people coming and just being there. It's so powerful, just being there for someone, sending a text to someone who's having a tough time, showing them a little bit of time. The difference it makes to people is just untold. There's no figure you can put on it. And it might not always seem like that either, because they're not saying, oh, thanks for this, because they're in a bad way. But it really, really, really does matter. And I think that you clearly get that completely with the way that you've described your feelings of saying, well, I'm not going through this. I understand what Sheila's going through, and I need to be there for her. I think that's really powerful.
I guess, the word understand, I probably don't understand, but I can see.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I think
it's
really difficult to truly understand when you've never experienced it yourself.
Yeah.
But I think for me, one of the key things is listening. You've got to listen to the person, and if they really can't do something, just say, okay, but you know what we're going to do? We're going to try it tomorrow. Okay, and we might not get all the way, but we're going to try, and we're going to make some progress. Yeah. Because when somebody is ill, doing something like walking to the end of the garden or walking to the end of the street is really difficult. So you've got to judge it. There's a bit of a fine line sometimes, but yeah.
Yeah, I think what you said there, that's the key issue, I think, isn't it? It's about saying, right, maybe not today, but we're moving forward, we're making progress. And I think all the literature says that that's ultimately the way to do it. It might just be very, very small steps. Yeah. I think that's really, really important. Is there anything else you want to add, Tom? Because I think you've covered a lot. We've covered a lot today, but I think the things you've mentioned, again, you might say, oh yeah, obviously that needs to happen, but it's so difficult to judge things when you're a carer. The skills you need, it is very difficult and very challenging. And I think that what you've described today and what you've been doing and going about things, it's very, very insightful to others listening. And well done, keep up the good work. But is there anything else that you want to add?
I'd just say, actually, you mentioned at the very start of the podcast when we were talking about, when you were mentioning Hope Street and about the environment. And I think one of the things that we've always said from the very beginning with Hope Street is that it's got to be a positive environment. Because I think anybody who listens to this and who has been to some support groups, quite possibly has experienced groups where you go and it's just not uplifting. It's not inspiring. It's the location, is cold and maybe damp. When you go in there, there's no laughter whatsoever. There's no personality, and people are able to sit round and, I guess, wallow in the way that they're feeling. But we've always been really careful to ensure that isn't the case at Hope Street. When we first started, it was like, these people who come for help don't deserve to be in a unwelcoming environment. So first off, it was a welcoming environment, like a nice place where you can feel comfortable. Secondly, it's got to be positive. It's got to be uplifting, because that's why people are going there. They're not going there because they want to just talk about how bad life is. Yes, they need support with that, but they need to learn as well. And that was really, really key when we set Hope Street up. And hopefully that's continued. And one of the things that I think surprises a lot of people when they're coming into the room is the amount of laughter in the room. And for me, that's one of our biggest achievements. It's just the amount of good feeling and laughter that goes on.
That first session where you spoke to me at the table for like 10, 15 minutes, and you were very genuine. And then at the end, I spoke to Sheila, I spoke to a few people in there, and I got that vibe. And I think that the other thing with Hope Street is, because of the multi-layered services that we offer, there's lots of things that you can choose from. And with the opening of the hub in Ormskirk soon, where we'll have a base, I think that will just make it even more visible in the community. And I'd just like to echo those sentiments that you just raised. Dom, we'll put, obviously, Hope Street's information and details will be in the podcast notes. I'll also put a link for Samaritans. If you are struggling to find someone to speak to, Samaritans, you can call them anytime about any issues that are affecting you. Dom, I'll put your link in, where obviously you talk a lot about Hope Street and the property thing that you do. People may be interested in that. And I'll put something about Counselling Northwest in as well.
Counselling West Lancs, it is, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a free service that people in West Lancs can access.
Yeah, cool. I'll make sure I've got the right name, and I'll put that in as well. But I would urge people to go to counselling. And if you are a carer out there, listen to this podcast, share this podcast with other carers, but also don't be afraid to speak to people and to get help and advice, and to get counselling. And what you do, carers are underpaid, often not paid at all if it's a family member, but even where people are paid as carers, they tend to be underpaid and undervalued. And I had an uncle who had mental and physical disabilities throughout his life, who died a few years ago, and he was cared for by people for years. And when we went to the funeral, I said to them, I think the manager of the company was there at the time. I don't think he liked it, but I said, I know how underpaid and undervalued carers often are. And what carers do, they keep the entire social fabric together. And Dom, fantastic work you're doing at home with Hope Street and in your own life, and all the carers out there. You really are appreciated, and you're doing great work. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Thanks for Dom for giving up his time. He is very, very busy, I know. And look after yourselves, folks, and talk to people. Check out provision of services near you. It might be prescribed services, if community initiatives, charitable organisations like Hope Street, but these organisations really make a difference. So thanks again, Dom, and thanks everyone for listening.
Cheers, Tim.